Hey y'all, my name is Max. I'm an instructor at Youth Code Jam, and today we're going to get started making our own game in Scratch. The first thing you'll want to do is open a web browser and head on over to scratch.mit.edu. Once you're there, go ahead and sign into your account. If you don't have an account, a Scratch account yet, I recommend pausing this video and going through the Join Scratch process so that you can easily save your code. So if you have an account, go ahead and sign in. And once you're signed in, press Create at the top of the screen. And this will create a fresh new project. So the project that we're going to create today is a game that focuses on rebounding, because rebounding is one of the fundamentals of basketball, and we're going to use some of the fundamentals of code to make our game work. So I'm going to title my project Rebounder, because that makes sense. And in this game, we're going to have a character that's not a cat. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the cat. But we're going to have a character that moves across the screen to catch some rebounds flying off of a basketball hoop. The first thing I'm going to do is make my backdrop, because I need a setting and I need a basketball hoop. So at the bottom of your screen, you may have to scroll horizontally to see it, but there's an icon that looks like a little picture of some mountains. Click on that to go to the backdrop library. And we're going to pick this first basketball court. And it's kind of important because some of the code is specific to this. So I recommend choosing this basketball court first, and then you can always go back and change it later and adjust your code. So now that we have a setting, let's add some of our sprites. The first one we'll do is a basketball sprite, and I don't even have to search for that one because it's right here at the top. So click on that sprite to add it to your project, and you can click and drag and move it anywhere on the screen because we're going to change where it goes later in our code. The next sprite we want to add is a player to catch the rebounds. So I'm going to go at the top. We have some categories, and I'm going to click on sports because I know all the basketball players will be in there. And we have a few different basketball players, but kind of like the court that I chose, the code is going to be a little bit specific to the player that you choose. So I'm going to choose the player that's named Max because that's kind of like me. That's my name. And Max can be a boy or girl. And you can change the name in the sprites pane down here. So if I wanted to change the name to something else, I could do that. But I'm going to keep the name Max because that's my actual name. So we have two awesome sprites. And the next thing that we're going to do is make sure that we have the sound that we want in our project. So our basketballs, we want to make a sound when we hit the rim. And to do that, there's some tabs up in the top left here. Make sure that you have the basketball sprite selected because each sprite has its own sounds. And we have some sounds here already. So there's a pop. I'm going to delete that one because I don't think we'll need that one. And then there's a basketball sound. So I like that sound, but I'm going to make it a little bit softer. You can play around with this at any time just by going to the Sounds tab. So I'm going to make it kind of soft. So we have a sound, we have some sprites. I think we're pretty good setting up our project. Now all we need to do is add some code. So the first block of code that I'm going to add is in the events palette. And that's because it's an event. And what an event does is it sort of starts some code when something happens. So we're going to start our game when the green flag is clicked. And that green flag is up here. And that'll start a lot of things in our game. So the next thing I'm going to do is go over to the looks palette. And these blocks are purple. And I'm going to find a block that says hide. And this might be a little scary if you actually click the green flag, because it'll look like your basketball goes away, but it's still there. It's just hiding. So once we've hidden our basketball, we're going to make a new block. We're going to make our own block that kind of controls what the basketball does all in one place. So to do that, go over to the My Blocks palette, and these blocks are going to be red, and click on Make a Block. And what we choose here, we can name it anything we want, but we want to name it something descriptive. So the basketball is going to be bouncing off of the rim and going in a random direction. So I'm going to call what this does brick. And that'll automatically put a block on your workspace, and it says define brick. And underneath define brick is where we're going to make the procedure of steps that makes our basketball move from where it is up on the top of the screen to the rim, and then to a random position down here, so that we have to move our character to catch it. So the first thing we're going to do is a position for the ball. And we can find a block that we need called go to X and Y position in motion. These blocks are blue. And before attaching it, actually, I'm going to change the numbers a little bit. So for X, it doesn't matter what you have in there. But for Y, I'm going to make it 200. And this will put it at the top of our screen. And I was hovering my mouse over here, so I noticed it said save now. If you see this, it means your project isn't currently saved. So if you see it, just click it, but it'll automatically save every once in a while as long as you're still connected to the internet. And what we're going to do, the reason this one doesn't matter, the X value doesn't matter, is because we're going to add another block within here to make it a few different X values. And we're going to do that randomly. So in the operators drawer with the green blocks, we're going to find this block that says pick random. And the random numbers that we're going to pick are going to be between negative 200 or minus 200. Actually, let's do minus 220 and 220. Cool. And once you have those numbers in there, you can put it in the X value place. So make sure that when you're doing this, you see the place that you want it to go highlighted before you let go. And now we have a block within another block. Pretty cool. And now we can attach that under here because this is our first step. We're going to choose a position up here, and then we're going to go to the rim. So, but the first thing before we go to the rim, actually, because our basketball is still hidden, we want to show our basketball. And then we want another motion block because we want to go from wherever we're positioned, wherever the basketball is positioned up here, to the rim. So I'm going to get a glide a certain amount of seconds to an X and Y position. And the X and Y position that we want, so X and Y are kind of like numbers in an address, and every point on our stage has an address. If you forget which way X goes and which way Y goes, there's some really handy arrows for you down here in the Sprites pane. And we are going to choose some numbers. So I found that 7 and 114 work pretty well. So if I just click this one, you can run some code by just clicking the one block. And you can see that where my ball was originally, it glided 1 second to that position. But that was kind of slow. So I'm going to make it less than 1 second, but more than 0 seconds. And the way we can do that is by adding a decimal or a period in front of the number. And I'm going to make it 0.2. You can play around with these numbers later and make it go. This will control how fast the ball travels to the rim. So if we do it again, we can put it up here and say go. That looks pretty good. Next thing we're going to do is add some randomness to our sound before it hits the rim, so that it's not the same sound every time. So I'm going to go to the sound palette here, and these are kind of like a light pinkish purple, and I'm going to choose the set pitch effect. And again, we're going to use some random numbers. You can go back to your operators drawer or palette. Sometimes I call these drawers. Or you can right click on a block that you want and duplicate it. I find that that's an easier way to sometimes get blocks. And then I can just change the numbers. So I'm going to change the number, pick a random number from 0 to 10. And then we can actually make our sound. So we are going to do, there's a couple blocks that we can use. We're going to use the start sound block and not use the play sound block, because that won't run any more code until the sound is done playing. And then we need another glide block. So we can duplicate again, but if we duplicate while blocks are attached, it's going to duplicate the blocks that are attached underneath, which is fine. I can get rid of them at any time by dragging them over here to the blocks. So we have another glide block, and this one we're going to give a little more time, because this will control the amount of time that the ball travels from the rim to wherever its random position is going to go. And that means that we need some more random numbers. So we're going to duplicate this random block again and put it into the X position here on this glide block. And you can hide your ball again if you want to. And I'm again going to do negative 220 to 220, or minus 220 to 220. And then in the Y, we need another minus, and we're going to do 200. And that'll be somewhere down here. So the last time we did it, it was positive 200, and it was somewhere up here. And now it's going to be negative 200, and it's somewhere down here. And then what we're going to do is add some time for the ball to stay where it is, so that you can pick it. You can still pick it up off the ground, but we're not going to add too much time to be able to do that. So in the control palette here, these sort of orange-yellow blocks, there's a wait block. And again, we're going to go less than 1 second, but greater than 0 seconds. And we're going to do 0.5 seconds this time. And then we're going to add a block that kind of has to do with code that we're going to write later. But essentially the way we're going to make this work is by cloning the basketball. That's why it's hidden, because this is our original basketball. And we're probably never going to see this actual basketball when we play the game, because it's going to be hidden. But we're going to make copies or clones of it, so that we don't have to make a bunch of basketball sprites to be able to catch a bunch of basketballs. So if the ball has been on the ground for too long, we want to delete this clone. So really this code is going to control a clone of the basketball sprite. And then that's the whole process. So we come from a random position, we show, we go to the rim, make a sound, and then we go to a random position down here. And then we delete if it wasn't rebounded. So The next thing that we're going to want to do, we need a place to keep our score, how many rebounds we've collected. And the way we can do that is with this tool called a variable. So go ahead and find the variables palette. It's a darker orange, and click on make a variable. We already have one variable that's made by default, but we can make a new one. And we get to name our variable anything that we want, but this is going to be counting the amount of rebounds that we've caught. So I'm going to call it rebounds. That makes sense. And we can go ahead and do it for all sprites. So now we have two variables, rebounds and make a variable, and it'll automatically put a counter for it up in your screen. So that's pretty cool. And the next thing that we're going to do, so we have our variable made, but it's not in our code anywhere. So we want to just make sure that when we start our game, when we click the green flag, we start with 0 rebounds. So we're going to set our rebounds variable, and by default it'll probably say my variable, but you can use the drop down menu to choose rebounds, and we're going to set it to 0. So the next thing that we're going to do is we need to generate some of these clones that we already wrote the code to control. And we're going to do a lot of them. So this process is going to be repeated. So if you go to the control palette, there is a block that says forever. We're going to repeat this process forever. What forever means is really until the program ends. The basketballs will keep more cloned basketballs will keep bricking. And once you have your loop, you'll notice that it has space for blocks to go within this block. And any blocks that we put in here will happen in order. And once you get to the bottom, it'll go all the way back to the top and do it again. And this is called a loop. So the first thing that we're going to do is not an exciting thing, but it's an important thing, and we're going to wait a little while. And we can add some more randomness. So I can duplicate one of these, or I can go to the operators palette and find one. And that's a lot of seconds to wait, and I don't think negative seconds are a thing. But we can choose the numbers. So I found that a good starting point is 1.5 seconds or 1.5 seconds and 3.5 seconds. And then we need to create the clone actually. So in that same palette, the kind of light orange or dark yellow, there's a block that says create clone of, and we want it to say myself because we want to clone the basketball, and we're coding the basketball right now. So if we do this, if this is running, it's actually doing something, but we just can't see it because our basketball is still hidden, and you can see that our brick isn't going anywhere because we haven't told this to happen yet. So we need a place for this to happen, and we need another event. So this event is not actually in the events palette, funny enough, but it's in the control palette, and it says when I start as a clone. So let's get that block and drag it out to our workspace. And underneath this block, all we need is the brick block. And this means that when we start as a clone, my code is running, so you can see it automatically made the changes, and now our bricks are happening. And that is pretty cool. So there's one more small amount of code that we need to add to get prepared for coding the player. And it's another event, and this one is going to be a message. So when we code our player, we're going to send a message over to the basketball because they have different code. See, we haven't written any of the code for the player yet. So we're going to make a new message by choosing on the drop-down menu, choosing new message. And this is going to delete the clone. So I'm going to call it delete clone. And then the last block that we need is the delete clone block, which is in control. And there you have it. You've got some bouncing basketballs, and they make some random noises, and they go to random places. And that'll make our game a lot more fun once we code our player to move across the screen to try to catch the balls. So stay in tune. We will be coding this player in the next session. So I hope you show up to that and continue making this game. I had a lot of fun today. I hope you did. Thanks for joining.